A good evening to everybody here. A good crowd joining us here on a Monday evening for another masterclass by Cinoco. Always very happy to host these, and especially happy to host these when someone like our guest tonight is here and the whiskeys he has brought are on the lineup. So I'm looking forward to this one. We're having a lineup with whiskeys from Douglas Laing, and we have our friend Dougal Barr here to talk us through them. Hi, Dougal. How are you?
Hey, John. All good. Thank you for having me along. So it's always a pleasure.
Are you at home on the office in Scotland? Where are you right now?
Yeah, at home, it's a nice advantage of it's a slightly quieter spell for me. So I'm actually in Scotland for the next couple of weeks, which is nice, a novelty.
Yeah.
So nice to talk to my friends across some waters. So
You have been traveling a lot the first couple of months of this
uh,
year.
I mean, it's what they pay me for, I guess. So I can't
Yeah.
complain too much. So, but yes, a busy few months, and as we all know, people maybe slow down their whiskey consumption in the summer, so it gets a little bit lighter, and
Hmm.
then we go again later in the autumn. So yeah, it's
Well,
definitely a busy through the year.
yeah. Well, of course, at Douglas Laing, you have whiskeys for the winter, for the fall, for the spring, and for the summer. So you're always busy.
Yeah, just the right time for any whiskey.
Where do you want to start, Dougal? Shall we put something in the glass first to start, or do you want to
Yeah, I think so.
tell something first?
I think it's always good to have some whiskey in a glass. I know there's some familiar faces in the group, but maybe anyone that doesn't know me, the global brand ambassador for Douglas Lane. Essentially, that means I spend my life on a plane or in a hotel room and not normally at my own home, so it's quite nice. But yeah, I typically cover kind of North America, Europe, and the UK, so I get to spend a lot of time on the road. And for anyone that maybe is not overly familiar with Douglas Laing, I know everyone is typically familiar with Douglas Laing, but the one thing Fred, the second generation Fred, my current boss, I guess, if you like, is adamant that we don't really do master classes because he doesn't claim to be a master after 60 years in whiskey. I definitely don't have any right to call myself a master. So we don't do master classes, we do tasting classes. So
Mhm.
we should definitely have something in the glass.
Yeah, sure.
So the first dram of the evening is going to be our Strathclyde, 16 years old.
Yeah, the
And
2005 vintage.
yeah, something quite. I really got into the habit of doing this of almost every tasting that I run or every tasting I'm involved in. Opening whiskey being a single grain is always such a good start. It's our breakfast whiskey. It is our getting everyone free flowing, getting everyone going a little bit. This one's bottled a little bit younger than maybe we typically bottle for Douglas Laing. It's definitely on the younger side that we'd ever feel comfortable bottling at. So that kind of 16 years old is pretty youthful for a single cask, single
Hmm.
grain from us, certainly. Normally we're up in that 18 years old and up, which kind of highlights when it comes to choosing the casks, there's no exact rule, there's no exact definite way we have to bottle. There's no restrictions on that. So we try and keep a certain level, a certain age bracket for certain bottlings. If we feel the cask is worthy of being bottled at a certain time, then we'll bottle it. We don't have to worry about bottling specific ages.
This one especially, I was reading the label when I was making the samples, and it's a refill barrel, so it's very low on the cask influence, so you get
Yeah,
a lot of spirit character here.
which again is pretty unique for a grain whiskey.
Yeah.
I think often we're very much moving towards older is better, and don't I wouldn't agree with that for single malts, but sometimes with grains, I think we'll all agree that a few extra years don't hurt them. But certainly doing a refill barrel for us, that means second fill. So we don't typically go too far beyond that. So if you see refill, whether that's a hogshead or a barrel or puncheon or butt on the Douglas Lake bottle, assume second fill is
Hmm.
a pretty safe bet. So yeah, very light cask influence coming through. It's I really like green whiskey because sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to get into without going. It's not overly complex, and I mean that in the most positive of ways. You don't have to overthink it too much. It's typically for us when we think of grain whiskey in Scotland, people do still associate it with this burning alcohol, no
Hmm.
flavor, no character. So it's quite nice to bottle something that does have quite So some layer, there's some nuances in here, but it's still not overly complex just yet. It's just this nice sweetness coming forward. I saw a few people have already picked out some orangey, some spice.
Yeah,
That's
I think Jean is giving us tasting notes or just communicating that he has oranges at home. I
yeah,
don't know what. Yeah,
highly recommended for both options.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
for anyone that's maybe not familiar, so Strathclyde is in Glasgow.
mhm,
It's basically just on the south side of the River Clyde that runs through Glasgow city itself. It's not relatively new. You're going back to 1920s, 1930s for establishment. And these days you're looking at around 14 million litres output. So it's not exactly a small distillery. You're doubling a Glenfiddich essentially. So
mhm.
it's definitely a big guy, but in the grain world, it's relatively small. They, like most grain distilleries in Scotland, when we talk about grain whiskey in Scotland, it means there'll be a small percentage of malted barley, some wheat, some corn, rye. Take your pick, we can use it. There's not really any restrictions on single grain.
Mhm.
Strathclyde is typically wheat, though, so that's what we're
Okay.
after. It's not nearly as syrupy almost that you get from corn spirit, and not nearly as spicy as you would get from something rye. Wheat is a bit more straightforward.
Yeah, and would it be also would it have more character than a corn distilled whiskey?
Hard to say, I guess. I think they do tend to find variations in there. Like Portland Ass was always probably the best example of a quite a corn-focused grain distillery in Scotland. So certainly there's an argument that some people find more flavour from a Portland Ass spirit than a Strathclyde spirit, for say. For me personally, it's got the similar base characteristics that we'd be
Hmm.
expecting. It's got that kind of mellowed out, very, for us, especially bourbon casking, very toffee, very caramel, very creamy, touch of coconut in there. And then this touch of spice that lingers through.
Hmm.
Yeah, talking about someone picking out like that fresh ginger, fresh cinnamon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's oranges, spices. Stefan feels it tastes stronger than you would expect at the ABV. The ABV is 48.4. So
Well, yeah, typically for us, again, these are not rules, but again, certain aspects we try and keep stable through all our bottling. So if it's between the ages of, well, what we're sampling tonight, we've got some whiskies from the Provenance range, typically 10 to 12 years and younger, very much about distillery style, typically lots of refill casks. Old Particular, probably our best known brand. If anyone's really into the Douglas Lane bottlings, this is really our oldest brand within us in terms of single casks. Even then, it's not that old as a brand, but it's really 12 to 21 years old, maybe a little bit older for some of the grain whiskies. But in that kind of 12 to 21, we try and bottle at 48.4. If it goes up towards the older end, sometimes we might bottle at 51.5, or if it's a special editions, it might be cast strength. And then we
mhm,
get to extra old particular, always cast strength. So we do have a certain division, but again, it will depend on the casking. If we feel it seems better at cast strength, we'll bottle at cast strength. If we feel something is a little bit hot, we can bring it back down. So there's that nice degree of control that we can offer. So we do try and keep it consistent. So this is sub 18. You can expect 48.4.
mhm, mhm. Anthony has a bit of a pancake feeling with this one.
Oh, yeah, I can
So
see that. Yeah, that kind of sweet pancake element, like a maple syrup pancake, something like that for sure.
I always, well, some people always say that grain whiskey uh, should have no character at all. Basically, it should be as bland as possible because it's the base for a blended whiskey. So that's why I was quite interested to taste this one on a refill barrel and that young to see what it would end up like.
Yeah, you certainly see. I think everyone's tasting notes are kind of showing it in terms of we see the still see the cask influence there, and naturally with a more neutral spirit, we're going to still pull quite a lot of flavor from that cask. But definitely, you do see difference between the grain distilleries. So there is definitely a variation between them, and yes, they're working towards a neutral spirit profile,
Hmm.
but these are obviously not going all the way to neutral spirit as such. Or if they are, we see the variation in grain come through. So yeah, it's interesting. There just doesn't have the subtleties of single malt. I think for me, it's the depth of flavor rather than lacking flavor.
Hmm.
And it makes sense when it was built as a purpose to dilute single malt to make it more palatable. Then yeah, it makes sense that you would probably produce something pretty neutral, so you can highlight the malts but dilute it down.
Yeah.
For us, we're typically looking for, especially when we're bottling grain whiskey, something that stands out is that drinkability, that super accessible, the kind of whiskey you could hand to any whiskey drinker, and
Yeah.
you know someone will take something away from it they enjoy.
Yeah. I think what John is saying is actually really to the point, because we are all spoiled and we are saying 16 years is very young, but it's actually not that young. It has spent 16 years in a cask. I mean that's
Sure.
a long while. So
Yeah, and I think for us, maybe it's about comparing it to, especially in this kind of group of people that know their whiskies,
mhm.
that it may be on the younger side of what you'd expect a single cask grain to be, rather than us just whimsically saying it's a bit young at 16
Yeah,
years old.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, cool one. Good one to start. I think everybody is agreeing on that one. Is there a little smokiness in the taste? I don't have some smokiness, but
No, it's an interesting one, but I think if memory serves me right, I don't have the official tasting notes in front of me, but I think Fred might have mentioned smokiness in the tasting notes of this one. So whether that's just more coming across as like a barrel char element, I
mhm,
kind of get the kind of classic struck match element to it.
mhm.
That kind of that I get. It's quite typical for a lot of grain whiskey, especially at a younger age. But I don't necessarily get smokiness myself either. But who am I to question Fred's tasting notes? So
Well, he's not here, so you can do what you want, basically.
that's right too. Until he
Yeah,
watches us back, then I've got a
yeah,
problem.
yeah, probably. He's not going to run in and take his desk back, because we had a preparation meeting earlier this week, and Dougal was in Fred's office for the Zoom meeting.
Yeah, very true. I did happen to steal Fred's office, and yeah, I got swiftly kicked out of Fred's office.
Yeah. Okay, Dougal, you sent me a really cool presentation. I'm going to try to follow you when you're talking about Douglas Laing and the whiskey. So, where do you wanna go now in the story?
Yeah, I think if you've still got the maybe essentially from the start is absolutely fine, and we can work our way through. Gives me a little bit of, for anyone that's not 100% on Douglas Laing's history, it gives me a little talking point.
It should be there in a second.
Yeah, perfect.
There you go.
Nice. Can I, unless you wanted me, I don't know if you'd want me to request control of it, but yeah, Douglas Laing. And it is pronounced Laing. Yeah, it's for anyone in the group that ever pronounces it Lang. I'm afraid it's wrong. It's Douglas Laing. It's the one clear thing that we do in the induction when you first start. It's Douglas Laing. So yeah, three generations, 75 years as of last year. So we're in our 76th year. Um, the kind of changes that have taken place versus when Fred started a business are pretty astronomical to try and compare them. If you look at where we are today as a business, you're talking, it used to essentially be a one-man show. Today at Douglas Laing, we've got just around 60 employees. So it was a pretty sizable business. And Fred Jr., second Fred, is pretty certain that his dad wouldn't really recognize where the business is today. I think it's really changed and developed since so Fred Sr. passed away in 1984. So there's been a lot of change in the last 30 years, and last 40 years or so. Pretty astronomical changes when you look at it on paper. For Douglas Laing, when it started, so 1948, we kind of point out there, we really have blending at our heart. And it still runs through the business. Anyone that follows Douglas Laing, you know how much we love our blended malts, and our King of Scots blend is still there today. But we started as a blender. That was the focus of the company. But Fred Senior's background was not necessarily in blending as such. He was following the Second World War, where he was in the RAF. He was based in Scotland, but working for a US based company. He was basically their Scotch guy. So he was their sourcer of casks, relationship builder here in Scotland for them in the US to create a blend called the King of Scots. In 1948, he got the chance to buy the brand. He was offered the chance as they were selling off a few assets to buy the brand, to buy the recipe or the rough recipe outline that he was already privy to, and three casks of spirit. So he basically had his starting point in the business. It was £1, one glorious pound that he paid for this, and Douglas Laing was born. So yeah, Douglas Laing and Co. founded in 1948. For the next 20 years was basically Fred building up stock to create King of Scots. That was it. And it really started at a very basic level in terms of approaching distillers, asking could they buy two or three, four casks of youngish malts, so 2, 3, 4 year old malts, and maybe some slightly older grain spirit. So nothing crazy, not huge volume. And that was really it. It was building from there. So you're getting enough liquid to produce the next batch of King of Scots and build up the stock so you have a deeper catalogue to continue producing the blends from. That was very much cash for casks. That's really the basis of it. Over the years, what's really changed and how you find us operating today is primarily through filling contracts. So we have certain deals with certain distilleries that Fred and now Cara have continued to develop over the last 75 years, where we will get X amount of litres straight from the distillery filled into our own choice of casks, either aging with them or as of the last 4 or 5 years, now aging with us as well. So we've got maturation warehouses down here in Glasgow. So we've got roughly 10,000 casks aging here in Glasgow today. So it was building up the stock to building up this relationship and to the point that we can now get spirit directly from the distilleries themselves. And then we could start really going off into our own different directions. Unsurprisingly, there was no big grand plan to become an independent bottler. The independent bottling world was a much more modern world for us. So we didn't come into that really until after Fred Senior passed away. So it is pretty modern in the grand scheme of things. The first what 60% of the lifespan of Douglas Laing was all about the King of Scots blend, and maybe the odd bits and pieces around that, but very much it was blending at the heart of it. So Fred Jr. came into the business in the early 70s, and then Cara joined the business in 2013. So Cara today, as of the beginning of this year, she was already director of whiskey, but is now the managing director. So Fred has completely passed the mantle on to Cara. So Cara is taking Douglas Laing forward from 2024. And certainly with your background, Jones, perfect example of a brand that Cara created was Scallywag. And that was her creation and her first Douglas Laing creation, if you like. But we are very brand led as a company. We have very strong identity, very strong brands, but definitely that is a big part of Cara's world that we're going to see more and more come through.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what my next slide is now. This is going to be a challenging one. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, but we're going to surprise ourselves.
Yeah, it's good. So, yeah. As natural as it gets, that's kind of the main core ethos of Douglas Laing. And it runs through every bottling you possibly get from us. There's kind of one exception to that is actually the King of Scots. So King of Scots is the only whiskey we really produce that's bottled at 40% ABV. So everything else is 46 and up. So everything tonight we are sampling is 46% right the way through to cask strength. Everything is always natural colour. Everything is always non-chill filtered. So there is this nice thing that runs through the entire business that we're trying to do whiskey properly. We're not here to produce bulk volume. Yes, we want to sell more. Of course we do. We're a business. But at the same time, the core principle of Douglas Laing has never really changed. It is about producing whiskey for the whiskey drinker. It is about making whiskey that we feel is as untouched as possible. We can't bring everyone to Scotland to visit us and do a cask tasting in a warehouse. So we want to try and bring that to everyone's home. Their experience of our whiskey should reflect that.
Is that becoming harder in the last years? To do?
I think with all the, it depends what we're trying to do. There's so many different channels for whiskies, and we cover so many different aspects of Scotch whiskey that there's some questions around, oh, could we do a 40% Epicurean for the on-trade world? So yeah, maybe in a bar or a restaurant, suddenly that could become more accessible. Because our whiskies they're not at the bottom end of anything. We are priced at a certain point because the overall quality going in here, the high alcohol, the cask finishes, the selection of liquid that we're using, there's not really any way of cheapening that. And so therefore the only one sacrifice we might make to that would be the alcohol content. That for us is maybe where you could see something develop in the modern world or develop further for us. But overall, that doesn't, I wouldn't say necessarily hard. It's just a choice that we've made and we're committed to. So yeah, everything we're kind of, I already briefly mentioned these. Yeah, provenance. we talk about it being the accessible single cask.
Mhm.
Where this is not necessarily for the person that would go to a supermarket and buy whatever's on the shelf at 40% alcohol, coloured, filtered, etc., etc. This should be someone's next stepping stone into the world of single malts, and we certainly feel that a single cask is such a good opportunity for someone to try something that is a cut above that you would typically get. It's the progression, it's the stepping stone to make you into becoming a single malt lover as such. Premier Barrel is actually typically the same level of whiskies, if you like. So typically 10, 12 years younger, but bottled in these ceramic decanters. Premier barrels are pretty unique. They are a bit of a throwback. They're, I believe, still one of only single malts bottled today consistently in decanters.
Mhm.
But this is what made Douglas Laing money. This was our focus as a business. We were doing huge numbers of decanters, ceramics, almost novelty is how I describe them these days. So golf clubs, golf bags, full Scotsman and full Highland dress. Their head would come off, and it's a whiskey container. A lot of stuff like that. So the Premier Barrel is something quite unique, but it's the kind of thing that people would pick up and go, "What is this?" Realize it's single malt, but still not even really look at the distillery name because they're so busy looking at the bottle. It's very collectible, it's very reusable, and very giftable is certainly the idea. But the overall whiskey is very much on the level of provenance range. So
Mhm.
46% alcohol, slightly younger, very distillery focused. Old Particular, as I mentioned, our kind of flagship, our it's 2013 again for Old Particular. So it's very much our focus for our single casks. People should know and associate Old Particular, Douglas Laing's. This is our selection of the ideal cask, right age, right distillery, right time. And then XOP or Extra Old Particular, it's the pick. It is the creme de la creme of our whiskies out there. It is always cask strength, always really unique distilleries. And I know we've got one lineup tonight that just gives you a chance to hopefully try something pretty unique. And of course, the price point reflects this. But again, even within the XOP range, we have them across every price point in there. So it's that little piece of luxury, I guess, if you like.
I like the vintage you're using as a picture in the XOP. 1979, that's just the best vintage there is. So
A big Smashing Pumpkins fan.
yeah, I'll skip this one because this is actually
Yeah.
another one.
Oh no, I think that was our Strathclyde. That was our
Yeah,
Strathclyde
it was
original.
actually we're actually having another one, Dougal.
Oh,
So
different
yeah,
16.
but
That's my fault.
I put the cast code in the chat so everybody can look it up if they want to.
Good.
So
So yeah, just this. I only threw in a few of these just to kind of show where we are. And also, I've been talking for too long. I think we should probably put the next whiskey
I
in
think
here
so too.
as
Yeah.
yeah.
So the next one is the Epicurean, the white port finish. Quite curious about this one too.
Also, if anyone has any questions in there at the time, I've lost sight of the chat. So
There's no questions at the moment, but
nothing yet. Perfect.
I feel like this one will raise some questions from some people. Stefan is already liking it. Port cask is something he likes, so he's looking forward to this one.
Yeah, so your tube kind of looks like that. So we've got the kind of wood series of Epicurean here. Yeah, no, sorry guys, this is the problem. If no one stops me, I can keep on talking.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
It's a dangerous one. So the port series, well, the wood series for Epicurean. For anyone that's not sampled Epicurean before, this is our regional malt, part of the remarkable regional malts, that is designed to be the epitome, the perfect example of our lowland style. Now, we are fully aware that you can go across the lowlands and find heavy peated lowlands versus light and delicate islets. So we're fully aware that the regional malts really are a homage to the classic, if you like. So what people typically expect for lowland whiskey, it's this light freshness to it. We don't disclose the distilleries on this bottling. It's one of these ones that when we have certain contracts, certain distillers, we can't officially name them. But you can take a pretty good guess by
There's not that
working
many.
out. It's a lot more than there used to be. Certainly,
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot more than there used to be. But yeah, I would definitely say expect some heavy hitting names in the lowland whiskey world in
Yeah.
here. It's a pretty easy one. Anyone that knows me is also maybe there's some of my background in another company that was featuring quite heavily in here.
Everybody's
But
Googling now. Everybody that
yeah,
doesn't know you is
where else?
Googling
Yeah,
now.
where else did I used to work? So yeah, this was the Lowland malt kind of idea was to produce this kind of very fresh, very light, very, and someone's already put an aperitif in there. Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. This kind of lighter style of whiskey. But here, the Wood series is a series that actually pretty much come to an end. We've pretty much completed it, although there's one interesting one coming this year with a cask type I don't think Douglas Laing's ever used, so that's quite fun. But yeah, giving sneak previews for the future. When we turn it off, I can talk about it a bit more.
it's not really a preview if you don't say what it is. Now it's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, exactly. It's fine. We can when the cameras go off later, maybe.
Yeah, cool.
But the whole wood series concept. So we did a range of different wood series, going through things like cognac to the three different port finishes, so a ruby, a tawny, and a white port. So they're really kind of highlighting the variation you can get within the port category. We've kind of really done everything, a few different wines, a kind of few white wines like reef salt, this kind of sweet dessert wine, but all designed to highlight one, what wood can impact a spirit, and two, the Lowland style is so receptive to cask influences and
Mm-hmm.
cask finishes. For us to do a big peat in white port, maybe we're playing around with that. But is it slightly easier to see the white port influence come through on an Epicurean? Absolutely.
Because the lowland distilleries, of course, have this lighter style
Typically,
to
yeah, and
them
that's
usually.
certainly at least our basis with our Lowland style, if you like, is on that lighter, more approachable, delicate side.
Mhm. People are liking it, Dougal. This is a super whiskey to put in a blind tasting. Yeah,
I
amazing
think
dram, perfect balance.
a lot. I get a lot of really interesting ones. A lot of people sometimes you pass this over and they wouldn't necessarily guess it's whiskey, which is
Mm-hmm.
quite a good challenge. So it almost has this kind of pear schnapps element to it because you get that kind of orchard fruit element, but then sweetness comes through, but it's very light on the nose. It's yeah, really interesting.
Robbie is thinking about breakfast whiskey,
Yeah, again, we're in the breakfast whiskey
fruity,
category.
mellow. Yeah,
So again, for this one, I think we might have a slide. I think I gave you the slide for this one, Jerome. I
yeah. I'll
think
put
it
it
was
up.
in
I'll
there.
put it up for you.
But it's essentially it was a collection of four casks that we put together to produce this bottling. So this idea was it's not necessarily a single cask as such. It's about taking to get us enough volume to produce the bottling, if that makes sense. So each cask gave us 414 bottles, but we
Mm-hmm.
did four times. So there's a really small batch. There's like I say only 1,600 bottles or so out there in existence. So it's yeah, a very small casking. It was the Wood series was very much let's really play with casking and see what we can do with Epicurean especially.
So
For
it's
anyone
are they also, sorry to interrupt you, Dougal, are these are there four different expressions then? Are they different, or did you mix the four casks together and then bottle four times 414?
So this was four combined together and then bottled, if that makes
Okay,
sense. So what you're sampling is the average.
okay, there you go. Yeah. Okay, wine casks finished in white port casks, Stefan is asking.
What's that, sorry?
Stefan says, so it's wine casks finished in white port casks.
So no, so this was not wine cask. I think that's a misprint in there.
No.
So it's essentially standard barrels, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, okay. For single 225 liter standard
was yeah
barrel. Yeah,
was
there you
the
go.
finishing, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's the typically with most of our blended malts, what's going on, kind of the construction of them, if you like, is aging separately, married together, then finished. However, of late we've actually been playing around with aging, say it was the Epicurean, there's 3 or 4 single malts aging separately. We would then finish two and then marry into the other two, depending on the balance.
Mm-hmm.
So we are playing around with different ways of blending, finishing the whole product versus finishing some of the ingredients. It allows us a lot more scope for intensity of cask finish.
Mm-hmm. I guess within the range of the regional malts, Big Pete is the big one, is the most popular one, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Big Pete's definitely still our number one, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's by volume for sure.
Yeah.
Scallywag is number two.
Hmm.
Epicurean's actually down the bottom. The Gauldrons is probably right beside it just because of volume of the Gauldrons.
Yeah, you don't make that too much. Yeah.
We don't have a huge amount of Campbelltown whiskey, surprisingly.
Hmm.
And then yeah, in the middle you've got Timorous Beastie, and the Rock Island is growing and growing and growing. So definitely Big Pete is still our most famous son.
Yeah. It's an interesting
Ah,
comment from Matthias from the cocktail world, of course. Add a dash of peated whiskey, and this would taste like a high-proof stirred penicillin.
I can see that, yeah, for sure.
Could be cool. You
It
could
makes a
basically
lot.
you can make your cocktails just with regional malts. Then just add some Big Pete.
I love this as a highball. It works really well, but even doing like a touch of peach liqueur or something like that, so can it really impact on that white port casking. You
Hmm.
get a kind of sweet apricot peach element to it, so you can end up just like a really nice fresh highball with a touch of peach liqueur in here. Works really well as kind of a horse's neck, so white port and ginger ale essentially. But yeah, very very drinkable.
Too drinkable.
Ah, good, great answer. So but it's one of these ones that the blended malts really allow us, and I think a lot of the time people are a little bit, probably not so much in this kind of group or this kind of setting, but a lot of people are still hesitant about this idea of blending, and somehow we are cheapening a product or cheapening single malt by doing
Hmm.
this with single malts. What we're creating is complexity. It's layering flavors in there that we can build and build and build. So when you take into account that we're working with multiple single malt, the variation we see in there, multiple cask types, there's so much we can do to build flavor in there. So the Epicurean is typically the one that we use a lot with bartending cocktails because it's really versatile. You can play around with it a lot. You've got that kind of citrus element, you've got the sweetness element, in the white port cask in here, you've got a lot more orchard fruits, very big and robust. So while Lowland whiskey is often on the lighter side, it doesn't mean it's lacking flavor. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
you can't have a really big body and still a lighter flavor profile.
Yeah. You were talking about casks, and the next slide was about cask selection, Dougal. So I'll just put
Yeah.
that one up there.
So again, I mentioned it already in terms of we are in charge of our own destiny, if you like. So we're choosing casks. If we're filling Kalila, we'll choose the cast that we're filling, and then if we are refilling, it will send the same cast that have already contained Kalila back to Kalila. It's that nice cyclical element that we now have. That is similar to a nice idea of some of our warehouse. So it's palletized, that just purely maximizing space that we have. It's not a traditional dunnage warehouse at all, but it means that we can not only know what we're making now, but we can map out the future. So we know what we need to fill. We know we can play around with certain cask types. We get approached a lot by other people offering us different casks. It's how we worked with some of these wines, some of these ports. It's about us getting access to different things. Anyone that tried our Rock Island Mezcal casking or
Hmm.
Rock Island Plantation rum casks, that was us working with Plantation directly. And that was us with a really nice experience of them bringing the gas to us, but giving us a range of options. So it's not like we are just buying a 10-year-old or 10-year-old single malt, putting it in a bottle. We've had sight of it for its full aging process that allows us to develop it in the way we want it to be. If you're onto the next slide,
Yep.
cask individually set, tasted, selected for quality, final blend going to Fred and Cara. This is still 100% true. So every single batch, all the regional malts will go through Fred and Cara and will be signed off by them. That's the family aspect of it. What you have there is each one of those tanks in that photo is what we would use to mix one of the regional malts. So they're 5,000 litre vats. So this is where you get the vatted malts from. That is our stainless steel vat. They would contain 5,000 litres, so around 7,000 bottles, if you like. So this is where we do the core range of the regional malt series. So each one of them could be marrying at the same time. We don't necessarily leave it to rest for days and days and days. It's around a 24-hour cycle where it's aerated. So it's literally being mixed within to marry the individual components together. That will then, before it gets into put into a bottle, there'll be a cask sample or a vat sample taken to Fred or Cara. They will nose it, taste it, compare it to a previous batch, where they can then make sure it's of the consistency and quality that we're after. We are not here to make I know we're not here to make molecularly identical whiskey every single time. If you consider 5,000 litres, we all know that a barrel's 200 litres, a sherry bottle 500 litres. If you add that up, there's not that many casks that go into a batch of
Hmm.
classic Big Peter, classic
Basically
Sky Lager.
small. That's basically small batch or.
100%. Everything we do for the regional malts is small batch. Naturally, that Epicurean that we're sampling just now is even smaller batch.
Hmm.
But even for the classic range, they're still really, really small batch. So there is this natural variation. And it does sometimes get to the point of let's add a little quarter cask of that, another little quarter cask of that. Let's add a half cask of this. It needs a little bit more of this distillery. So there is still that micro level, but just maybe not necessarily to the same extent as a big guy. Like working with bigger distilleries, when you're making a classic 12-year-old or a classic non-age statement, there could be hundreds, if not thousands, of casks going in. So it's a
Hmm.
lot easier to hide a spirit that maybe isn't up to the right quality.
Hmm.
We don't have that luxury. We can only put something good in here because it's going to be really clear that we are, or really be, it'll be very clear if we were putting in poorer quality casks in here. So just to go back, sorry, the gentleman that is just starting walking up the stairs is Alexandra from Plantation Rum.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there's literally a photo from the
Alexandre
Plantation.
Gabriel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is literally him on site having a tour as we were doing a cask sampling with him and Carrot to see what we were doing with their
I
casks.
think he's the one just at the bottom of the stairs, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, this is a nice full circle moment of mentioning it.
Oh no, good. Yeah, I didn't spot him though, so good to see. I quickly went on to the next slide, so now everybody knows that it's the Tullibardine that's
Mhm.
next on the tasting table, the provenance one. It's one of these distilleries that you don't see too much of. There's some distilleries that you see hundreds and hundreds of independent bottlings of, but Tullibardine is a little bit more rare in that respect.
It's the nice thing I think of it highlights our relationship building that
Hmm.
we managed to get access to certain distilleries. There is also when you start seeing certain whiskies in the provenance range, it probably means that we've got good access to it because it
Yeah.
means that we've got younger spirit to highlight. My favorite one is certain something like Aaron. I know there's maybe one or two Aaron fans in the group tonight. There's maybe one
Hmm.
particular one, but independently bottled Aaron highlights how strong our relationship is with the Isle of Arran distillers. Like, it's not a distillery you ever really see out and about from anyone else independently, and it's something Douglas Laing's very proud of building that relationship. Now, this kind of highlights for us, and a lot of time people ask us, why would a distillery give you spirit, or why would they sell you their whiskey? And do they offer control, or do they want more control over it? Once it is in our hands, there's a contract element in terms of if there's a distillery who asks us not to name it or give a hint to where that whiskey might be from, then sometimes we have to respect that. Other times, it's more like we're like an extra arm of their marketing department. If someone samples this Tullibardine tonight and says, "Wow, I really like that. That is something I've never tried before," they're far more likely to go and seek out official bottlings from Tullibardine.
Hmm.
So certainly, as long as we're doing our job right and we're bottling the right whiskey, the right time, and the right quality, that we should always operate in like this symbiotic relationship with the distillers. At the same time, if and everyone keeps on asking about it, if we're approaching a whiskey law again, if we're approaching
Yeah.
this collapse because there's been so many new distilleries, this is the nice thing of working with Douglas Laing is because we're multifaceted as a business. We have the blends that can support our single malts. We have the single malts that can support the blended malts. We of course have our own Strathern distillery. That we have all of these aspects that can support each other. So when a distiller has maybe found themselves with a overstock of something, instantly we can say, well, we'll be able to maybe take an X amount of liquid or X number of casks. But this is one of these things that independent bottlers, and certainly ones that like ourselves that have been around for a little longer period of time. I mean, Gordon MacPhail's changing, of course, but your Berry Brothers, your kind of
Hmm.
respected names in the independent bottling world, we have this relationship where we will, they can rely on us at certain times to maybe pick up that slack. In the past, we were very good at being, if a distiller needed cash, we would be the cash flow. So
Yeah.
it's definitely developed that way. And something like Tullibard's a good example in terms of a distillery that was mothballed, a distillery that's changed hands multiple times, a distillery that had to completely revamp all of its casks.
Hmm.
They're pretty public about the fact that they came into a distillery that had been using very poor wood, and they basically had to spend an absolute fortune to recask everything. Now we're starting to see a more typical Tullibard style develop, and that's what the provenance from us should reflect. We are not here necessarily to talk about only Tullibard. It's Douglas Laing's view of Tullibard.
Yeah.
So a light bourbon cask influence, nothing dominating the spirit, very approachable, very much this kind of lighter, slightly nuttiness to it. It's really, really fresh and green. If you know, almost go towards a Lowland style if you like. It's
Mm. I was wondering, and I've been wondering about this for a long time, and people who know me will know that I try and ask everybody about this, especially people from independent bottlers. Is it sometimes say that I have a distillery and I want to relaunch my core range and I want to launch a new 12-year-old whatever? Um, do distilleries approach you guys to say, can you also release at about the same time some independents just to get the name out? Is there a strategy to it, or is it? But sometimes it just seems too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence.
there's a lot of collaboration in the industry. It's definitely not nearly as cutthroat and bloodthirsty as a lot of people
Mm,
imagine. Like we wouldn't exist without a positive relationship with these distillers. So clearly, it's a very collaborative industry. To that extent, I would probably say not really.
mhm.
We are a lot of times someone like Fred is and Cara as well are so well connected that there's always conversations. But whether that reflects more us maybe bottling after the release comes. Certainly, we were like I use Aaron again as a good example because there's no one else that had it, but we bottled a 25-year-old in the same time that Aaron bottled a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
That wasn't necessarily us doing it on purpose, but also we happened to have some phenomenal 25-year-old Aaron that was ready to be bottled. We definitely work around the if it's ready to be bottled, we're going to bottle it
Hmm.
because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what quality might change. You never know if a cask could turn and suddenly you lose something really amazing. I
Yeah.
know a few years ago, I think it was an Altmore that Fred wanted to bottle as an XOP at like 9 or 10 years old because he thought it was better than like some of these 25, 30-year-old whiskies that we're bottling.
Yeah.
It's one of these ones that, and it's why you sometimes see a 10-year-old from one bottling will be in the provenance, and then a 10-year-old of something else will be in no particular.
Mhm.
It's about us trying to gauge the quality and the cask influence in there. So if we feel it's more reflective of a distillery style, yeah, we might bottle it as a provenance. If we feel it's more reflective of our version of that distillery, more likely into old particular.
I can probably also imagine that, for example, the Aaron example is pretty good, and I'm taking the liberty of asking this because I see a lot of good chat going on, but we'll get to that in a second. Um, if Aaron is about to release a new 25-year-old and that's a big thing for them, I can imagine that you guys, for example, you have a good 25-year-old that you just wait for them to have their release and then bottle it.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Probably.
we're not under any like chance to try and steal their thunder or
No, there you
in
go.
case of
Yeah.
cocktails. It's far more likely of if people are all talking about their 25-year-old.
That yours is getting more exposure to, but at the same
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
exactly. And it is this kind of collaborative. As long as we're not, like I say, stepping on their toes, I don't think that's ever the purpose. Certainly,
Mm,
we wouldn't last long and get access to all the liquid we get access to if we were annoying other distillers. So it's very much open and collaborative approach to an
yeah,
extent.
I think so too. Okay, some tasting notes, Dougal, for you. Anthony and Lucas have some Campbelltown things going on, some smokiness
Interesting.
in this one. Then we're getting Stefani's having lots of citrus fruits, nice grassy touch with a good freshness in the end. More grassiness, vanilla coming through, and then some anise,
Oh, yeah, like star
uh,
anise. Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah.
anise and clove. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get the close. It's because it's got that quite drying effect of the spirit. It's definitely got that style. I think for
Hmm.
me, often that kind of smokiness, if you like, comes across as the dry, peppery elements in there.
Yeah.
Because it's not like a punch of black pepper. It's far more kind of light pepper. It's like white pepper. It's far more delicate than that. It's not a big dominant cask in here. It's a refill hogshead. So you're
Hmm.
talking bigger casking, less wood contact. When I started working with Beam Suntory, within the first few weeks, Ron Welsh described whiskey casks to me as like making a cup of tea with the same tea bag, which I think is the most British way of describing it. I think is the perfect analogy. It is exactly what it is. This is essentially the second time we've used this cask. It's a bigger cask. It's not going to dominate anything. So we're getting loads of those S3 notes from the distillery. So it's very fruity. It's got this kind of fresh greenness to the spirit. And then, yeah, this is one of these ones that the cask is definitely not dominating at all, but it's just rounding it out. It's giving it this nice sweetness overall.
These are cool ones to get to know a distillery, I think, because you can
Exactly.
really get the character
And
coming
that's
through here.
100% what we're looking for with the provenance range. It should be that I've never tried this distillery before. This should be representative of that distillery.
Of course, that's also where the name comes from.
Absolutely.
Provenance. Just
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It is the provenance. Yeah.
Now, okay. Yeah. I'm learning too. That's the first time I've had it explained that way to me about provenance. So good.
Although it has developed into that. I was in Germany last week. I was looking at Port Ellen 18-year-old bottled in the provenance label. So it has definitely developed. So we definitely used to have really only one single malt we
I
had to
guess there's
blend.
not many of those coming up in the next few years.
Unlikely to see many Port Ellens in the provenance range.
Yeah. I've got a tasting note from Bjorn and Joren. I don't know if they're both there or just either one of them. We skip the main course and go from the aperitif directly to the dessert. Coffee from the tasting notes in the slide, but just with a little bit of bitterness and citrus and spices. So yeah, good tasting note, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and understand the touch of bitterness is there as well. Like it is a bit dry, it's a bit tart, is how I'd probably describe it. It's got this almost like it's drying effect in the sides of your mouth and the tip of your tongue.
Mhm.
But I would say this is where we're trying to bottle at the right time and also reflect with the price and what alcohol risk we come out at. All of these things we try and take into account when bottling.
Mhm.
If we age this up, I think that bitterness would disappear. It would sweeten up, it would get
Mhm.
more mellow, it would get richer. But here it stays really fresh, really vibrant, which is what I really love about younger whiskey and bourbon casking. And anyone that asks me, oh, is it older whiskey versus younger whiskey? Older whiskey is often more elegant. It's often richer. It's got that depth of complexity. Young whiskey can be really vibrant, really interesting. Doesn't have that big, long-lasting palate. Although saying that, I've only still had one taste of that, and it's lingering, so it still
Mhm.
has that longevity, but maybe not intense and long-lasting. But it does have a really vibrant, upfront, fruity element to it. Lots of
Mhm.
spirits now.
It's the age-old discussion between age and between youth and old age. Which one is the best?
Yeah, and I
They're
think
both interesting.
anyone that's been in whiskey long enough or likes whiskey knows it's complete nonsense. You can have terrible old whiskey and you can have amazing young whiskey. I stand by that. My favorite Kalila is still about 5.5, 6 years old in bourbon casking. That is for me ultimate Kalila. But yeah, it's every whiskey's got its moment. We are just trying to see each single cask as a snapshot. It's a one go. It's a one attempt at finding the right moment to put that in a bottle. The nice thing is, if you love it, you've got that snapshot. If it's not for you, there's something else coming around the corner. Like we are constantly bottling and
Yeah.
constantly changing.
I'm the last couple of months I've been really thinking about this, and I also think that just the concept of tasting something is also a moment, and it's more like going to a live concert than listening to a recording because it's always different.
Yeah, absolutely. And whiskey's so personal. What you're doing in that moment. The amount of people that when I used to work in distillery, the amount of people that would come in and say, "Oh, I loved your whiskey the first time I had it. The second time, I was really disappointed."
Hmm.
Well, what were you doing the first time? And yeah, oh,
Yeah,
I was getting married, or it was a big celebration. So we could have given you any cheap blend, and you
yeah.
probably would have
Shouldn't have
it would have
spent so
tasted
much.
it would have tasted amazing. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
one of these things. It's such a personal journey to find something you enjoy and something you like.
yeah. Anthony's saying it's the same with people, old age and young people. Yeah, there you go. And Kevin is looking at the bottles behind you. Uh,
Uh, I've hidden a bunch of things away. Yeah,
Yeah. Listen, shall we go on to the next one?
yeah,
And
I
I
think so.
think this is one that I've been looking forward to a lot because I haven't had this one. And I showed this one to my girlfriend, and she was really excited about this one too. It's the Scallywags, the chocolate edition. So yeah, let's put
So
that in
this
the
is.
glass.
I need to go get my bottle. So yeah, this is the 2023 edition of our Scallywag chocolate, I believe.
Is it on the label?
It won't say it, but it should look a lot like that.
Yeah, it's this one.
Okay. So the reason I say this is we have just launched within the last week and a half, 2 weeks, our 2024 edition.
Ah, okay, there you go.
So this chocolate edition that we are sampling is the sixth edition. So sixth, a yearly release. And the chocolate edition is very much a fan favorite. Is that fair to say? I feel like Scallywag. I mean, you put a cute dog on the label, and
Mhm,
you already sell a lot of bottles, as it turns out. But Scallywag, for anyone maybe not familiar with the brand overall, it was the second follow up after Big Pete. So we had launched Big Pete in 2009, essentially because we had an overstock of Isla malt at the time. That's what prompted Fred to try and create the blended malt. When you think about 15 years ago, we were looking at stuff like Monkey Shoulder. It was a mixing whiskey. It was in bars. It was pretty affordable. It was good quality and good liquid, but we weren't trying to target that audience. Big Pete was very much a celebration of our Isla casks that we had. So when Big Pete was thrown together of Bowmore, Ardbeg, these are big names in the
mm,
whiskey world. It's not just like some smaller liquid or smaller distilleries that we happen to have casks of. The whole concept was really to try and bottle down. This is Isla in a bottle. And believe it or not, Big Pete was generally viewed as almost like Fred's version of a Port Ellen. And I don't mean that in any ridiculous way, but Port Ellen is, of course, now gone crazy. But Port Ellen was the blending whiskey. It was the softer side of Isla that was wonderful for blending and is not the extremes. And that's certainly what Big Pete is. And so this whole idea for 3 or 4 years was sitting there. And with Cara joining the business in 2013, they realized, well, we have the stock to do it. And what is the opposite whiskey of Big Pete? So, Speyside, sherried, that's the kind of target here. So we went from big and smoky and robust to your more rich and elegant style for Scallywag. Now, Scallywag still features a lot of the same distilleries that we did back in 2013. The three that you'll still find named on the bottle, Macallan, Mortlach, and Glenrothes, is a pretty damn good collection of
mhm,
our single malt choices from Speyside. We naturally had some other options in there, and there are a few other distilleries that go into Scallywag, but typically the main bulk of the liquid is coming from those three distilleries. The big difference we see here, so anyone that kind of knows the brand, the classic is 80% sherry casking, combination of Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez, and 20% bourbon casking, sometimes as much as 90% sherry casking. But then for the 10-year-old, we bring that up to 100% sherry casking. So we have the liquid where we've already done 100% sherry casking. The chocolate edition is our attempt to not really, it's not necessarily supposed to taste exactly like chocolate. It's supposed to give you the chocolate experience. I think I just saw Anthony's message
yeah.
ping up there. It's instantly got this palette of dark, creamy chocolate. And this is us picking out casks throughout the year that we feel give us this chocolatey element. So it's very much based on a cask by cask basis that will end up in this if they are giving us chocolate notes. For me, it's always dark chocolate in the nose. It doesn't necessarily go milk chocolate for me. It's always dark chocolate. And for me, it
Mm,
always ends up being like a dark chocolate and like stem ginger. It's got this kind of slight ginger element in there as well.
mhm,
But yeah, it's that palate, that velvetiness that we talk about in the tasting notes, that kind of
yeah.
mouth coating, like a milk chocolate or not milk chocolate, mocha, like
Okay, yeah.
coffee, a chocolate coffee. And it's got all of this amazing mouth coat quality, and then you see the big sherry cask heritage come through in the finish with this rich spiciness, some more sweetness, bit of nuttiness. So the chocolate edition each year is our selection of casks that gave us chocolatey notes. So it's us putting aside and saving for this once yearly limited edition.
Yeah. What's cool is that obviously everybody knows that combining whiskey with chocolate is always a good idea. Some good chocolate, some good whiskey. But what I like is Kevin here is saying raspberry, this one would be a match in heaven, and raspberry and chocolate work well together. So I guess that's mission accomplished for you guys.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. I think lots of people are picking out the pudding and chocolate mousse. But imagine a dark chocolate cake with fresh raspberries, instantly it starts to work.
Yeah.
Or almost like for me, it's the palate is like more without it being cold, it's more like chocolate ice cream. You've got that kind of creaminess. It's not overwhelmingly sweet. It's more about the creamy texture that we're getting in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But Scallywag is such a strong brand for us.
What type of cask gives you the most chocolatey notes? Martin is asking.
Oh, interesting. Typically, I'd always split it between the two. If it's dark chocolate, I'd go more Oloroso. If it's milk chocolate, I'd expect more PX. So, kind of going more on that sweeter side with the milk chocolate. Dark chocolate, I think of more of that touch of bitterness, that slight touch of bitterness that you'd expect for then where we see the coffee bean, the coffee note come through. And so instantly, if we're working with more Oloroso, we get more of that dry, slight bitter notes to it. But
yeah, this one should be accompanied by cutlery, Anthony is saying.
Very chewy. It's a proper whiskey you can chew, because I'm not a big sherry cask fan. If I was being entirely honest, Scallywag is my bottom of the regional malts for me personally, because I'm not a big sherry cask guy. But I totally appreciate what we've tried to do here. It's about pulling together to create an experience, and I think it really, really works.
Yeah. Also, what Matthias is saying is a good one too. I think it's not so much chocolate, but more like the single origin cocoa beans that have some fruitiness to them too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still got that kind of classic Speyside fruitiness, if you like. So it's got like kind of rich orchard fruits, maybe moving more towards darker fruits here, some plums, a little bit of cherries. So it's definitely going a bit darker. But yeah, very much it's not supposed to be only chocolate. It's definitely a experience of sherry and what sherry brings to whiskey, which often is chocolatey notes. Now that's not the only thing we're trying to get here.
Yeah. And you only make 4,200 bottles of this every year.
It varies a little bit, but yes, always a single batch, sub 5,000 typically.
You know you're talking to Belgians, right? So
sure, I know it's a tough audience, right?
Yeah, for chocolate.
This is 2023's edition, so I think there's still a few bottles floating around. The 2024 edition was the first time we've introduced a port cask finish as well. So a combination of ruby and tawny port casks finishing of the scallywag. So it's quite a unique process. And that one is where we're kind of finishing some of the ingredients in port, some in sherry, and everything coming together.
Yeah. Bjorn has a good idea. Give it to the chef of your favorite restaurant and let them surprise you with a matching dessert. And Lucas is telling that he already did that with his local restaurant, so with Konijntje. So yeah.
For me, I love cooking with food, and I often use throughout the year when I'm when I'm in the country making chocolate brownies with this. So if adding some of this into it just gives it a big richer, spicier style. As much as I enjoy doing a big peat salted caramel chocolate brownie as well. But yeah, I love cooking with whiskey in this way because you can really play around with all the flavors. And it doesn't always have to be sweet. That's one thing.
Now we're talking about cooking. We have some cocktail people here. I know Bjorn is here. I know Matthias is here. Is this something that inspires you guys to do something to work with?
I don't think we necessarily, maybe with Epicurean a little bit, we'll try and maybe see it as a base for something. But for us, typically we're looking at what flavors do we produce and then work our way back towards the cocktail. We don't often start with the cocktail we want to work towards. The Scallywag, we do a lot of classics with. It makes an amazing Manhattan, and that's typically where we go for. And it works, and you can understand exactly why it works with that kind of sweetness combined with bitterness and everything coming together. At the moment, though, I think what we've really realized is people enjoy their whiskey in every way. So for us, we have the kind of signature classic serves, and then we just love to see what people come up with all these brands. There's so many opportunities, whether you went down for here the chocolatey elements or you went down the spicy elements. You can go in two very different directions with your overall flavor.
Maybe looking at something with like some chili peppers,
Yep.
stuff
Again,
like that.
dark chocolate and chili, it works
Yeah.
really, really well. You can use this. I've done it with like chocolate miso glaze and things like that for steak. Works really, really well.
Mm.
So all of these things can work really well.
Matthias is saying it's a very forgiving to work with creating drinks. Yeah, there's some viscosity to it that is a blessing in cocktails. So I had the same thing when I tasted it. I was immediately thinking this could be something for cocktails to work with. So but I don't know enough about cocktails to do something with it. But I think Matthias is already thinking about it now.
And it's a nice thing we know that. So this is a yearly limited edition, but the core Scallywag, the DNA is all still there as well.
Yeah.
So yes, I appreciate mixing a limited edition. We love it, and I love to see it, and I love mixing any kind of cocktail with a kind of premium ingredient. But the core Scallywag DNA should always run through, as with all the regional malts. The kind of all the
Sure.
limited editions are just a highlight of the classic. It's still has the same distillery, same DNA that we can then play off with the cask finishes or the different variations.
Dougal, talking about premium products, shall we go on to a 30-year-old whiskey?
I think that should work.
Yeah. So, as you all guessed by now, we're on to the Cambus XOP. And maybe some people will be surprised that this is not the finish of the evening of the tasting.
There was a few kind of we kind of could have gone either way. I think this would have been an absolute fine finish, but I was fully aware that I did not want something to overpower this, and our
Hmm.
final whiskey of the evening has the potential to overpower.
Yeah.
But it's one of these nice moments of history, and certainly something I love with Douglas Laing. And we are very lucky, with, especially with our grain whiskies, that we have bottled a lot of ghost, mothballed, closed distilleries over the years. So Campus is a closed distillery, has been for over 30 years now. Yeah, 1993, I think, 1994.
Yeah.
So
Something like that.
I
Yeah.
think it's 93. So we are over 30 years since. I appreciate this one was bottled last year, or year before. I think it's 2022 bottling. I think.
Hmm.
So certainly Canvas is one of these ones that eventually we're going to run out of this, and this is going to be gone, and you're never going to get to try it again. And it is just that nice experience of trying something that you know is not recreatable. And while that is always the nature of single casks, when it's a distillery that doesn't exist anymore, that's it. If you love it, gone. Yeah, it's never coming back. So
Also, the concept of this is an old whiskey, but this was distilled in the year I turned 12, so it's confronting.
I mean, yeah, I'm lucky in terms of being slightly younger, but not by much.
Yeah.
But if you're a collector of whiskey from your year of birth, it becomes a more and more
Oh
expensive.
yeah, no,
It's
can't
great when
afford
you're
it anymore.
great when you're 18, but the moment you get to get 30 years and up, it becomes a lot more of a challenge.
Yeah. Well, there's even older people in the chat, Stefan. So
As
and
I said earlier, older, more elegant.
yeah, wiser people.
Yep, a lot more depth.
So now we're having this is a 30-year-old. It's at cask strength, so 59.5%. Refill hogshead. It's completely different than the Strathclyde we had earlier.
Yeah, and we really start to see one the advantage of age in terms of creating a more. I don't like using the words complex versus not complex and things like that for
Mm,
grain whiskey. But it's a much bigger, rounder style now. You can see where the edges have rounded off in that Strathclyde style. So for me, that burnt matchstick element's completely gone now. Now it's I'm sorry, I just saw Anthony say use smooth. I agree, very
yeah,
smooth.
yeah.
But
Smooth, complex. Yeah.
it feels a bit too easy to use smooth. It's the well-roundedness of it. It's the wood and the spirit have completely integrated. There's not any out, outlying spiky edges to it anymore.
Hmm.
And grain whiskey, as you get up in this kind of area, this kind of 30, 35, 40-year-old whiskies, even at cask strength. So yes, it's up at 59.5%. If you can imagine drinking a single malt at 59.5%, it would definitely give you a bit of to let you know about it. It would give you a touch of
Hmm.
a little slap around the head or a little touch upon it would let you know it's there. Whereas this, it's in that elegant category.
Do you think they filled this at a higher strength than 63.5, which is the
I would
norm?
expect so. Yeah, I'd say
Yeah.
typically we have a clear example of these high caskings. So yeah, upwards of high 60s, low 70s
Yeah.
is definitely not unheard of with grain whiskey. So yeah, 30 years of loss and only dropping say 10% is pretty good.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, Fred, you can, for anyone that's not maybe looked too closely at our tasting notes, you always get the set of initials of who did the cask selection and did the tasting note and ticked the cask off. So in this case, a FHL, so Fred Hamilton Laing. If you have a CSL, you have a Cara bottle. If you have a DGB, I'm sorry, you've got a Dougal bottle. It's definitely not desirable. I've lowered the value massively by having me do it. So yeah, there's quite a lot of DGB bottles out there at the moment as well. But it's quite a nice thing. Everything ties back to the business. It's not a big group of people that get to do this, and it's not a huge people that do a selection. It's very much still within the company, very close, and there's still that kind of personal bit of it's our views on it. We're not saying it's what everyone will get in there. Certainly, Fred versus Cara, there's a completely different style of
Hmm.
tasting note. There always has been. Fred is very much a poet in waiting. So I think it's this nice thing of tying everything back to the family.
Yeah. What maybe something you could do, that what I think is cool with tasting notes is, if you put all your tasting notes that you wrote for bottles in an app and make a word cloud, you can see which words you use the most for tasting notes.
It's funny because Fred is adamant that we are if you're talking about sherry cask finish, for example, we still make whiskey. It should reflect the cereal, it should respect the grain,
Hmm.
and very much you will notice that almost all of our tasting notes will always have a mention of malted barley, cereal. There's certain things that we want to make sure that we're clear that we make whiskey
Yeah.
first and foremost.
Fisherman's friend in the tasting notes, and now Anthony's putting this in his car to replace the fisherman's friends. So maybe not that good of an idea, Anthony.
Yeah, I do not give advice on this.
No, no, of course not.
Legally, I can't recommend anything.
No, no, no. Here you go.
I also think it's really nice it's a nice dram of showing what you get when you do a longer maturation with refill hogsheads. So this is when we say hogshead, we always mean bourbon hogshead. If it's a sherry hogshead, we'll tell you it's a sherry hogshead. So when you see refill hogshead, assume bourbon casking.
Yeah.
But it means that nothing's been dominant, so it's just been this really slow pull out of flavor, and that's why we really like working with hogsheads. It's a really nice slow uptake of flavor and profile, nothing dominant.
And also, there's no recasking along the way in these 30 years of
Yeah, this this
maturation.
is this is full maturation in a single refill hogshead.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, if we move something around, we'll typically tell you about it. We try and be as transparent about that as possible.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's not, and even if we have finished in another bourbon barrel, we'll still tell you that. So
I think a good marketing advice for you is use Fisherman's Friend more in tasting notes because people are getting all kinds of ideas about this now. So.
there was a sudden jump up with car crashes in the
Yeah,
Belgium that we
yeah,
are
yeah.
responsible for.
Do you do a lot of recasking? Martin is asking.
I think it's more a case of an awareness if we feel like we have to. It's the constant sampling, unsurprisingly. And one of the big reasons we wanted to get our own warehousing that we wanted to have closer contact with our cast so we didn't have to wait months and months to get a sample. Because if something's gone a direction you maybe didn't want it to go and you felt like it needed recast, it's better to maybe understand that earlier than later. So we definitely do recast and we will move things around, but typically we're looking for does it necessitate that? Do we need to have that to happen? It's not maybe standard practice for us. It's about keeping a closer eye, if you like.
Hey, any other questions, guys? Because you're There are questions, but not too many, so cool.
Good. Either
Yeah.
I'm answering everything or it's everyone's bored.
No, no, I think you're answering anything, everything. Yeah. Or the whiskey's just too good to think about questions.
Again, I come back to it. It's a piece that we're never going to see again,
Hmm.
and it's one of these ones that I love old grain whiskey in general. I was quite excited when we had like a young grain and old grain in the same tasting. It's really nice to compare them because they've gone in
Hmm.
completely different directions. I would often use grain as my if you've got that friend that you can't convince to drink Scotch, but they like bourbon, single grain Scotch is a perfect introduction. It's a perfect stepping stone, the
Yeah.
gateway drug to drinking single
Well,
malt.
I think another good example, well, another good thing in this tasting in this lineup now is with the 16-year-old Strathclyde and then this one. Sometimes people say that all grain whiskey is the same. I'm kind of coming back to what I was asking earlier about they don't have any character or whatever, but these two whiskeys just show that there's a real range of tastes
Yeah,
and
and I
flavors
think
going
I
on there.
definitely think we've all seen it, certainly with some people in the group. To be honest, with a lot of people that are here tonight, we've had similar conversations. People are waking up and realizing the quality you get with single grain, especially in the
Mm,
single cask world. And right now, you can still get an amazing single grain whiskey, 30 years old, at a pretty phenomenal price, I think, for bang for your buck quality versus price. But I definitely see an awakening of people are understanding that you can get a lot of really
mm.
interesting whiskey with single grain, and they're realizing the quality that's there. So I don't know if we are forever going to see that grain whiskey this
Yeah,
price
I was
drop
just
to
I was just thinking that we shouldn't tell people about this basically.
no. Within the whiskey
Just
community,
keep
we should keep it
quiet.
a secret.
Yeah,
Although, as working for a whiskey business, I do need people to buy whiskey. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
stuck in two camps.
Well,
I'm both
I'll edit this one out of the recording.
yeah, I'm both a whiskey geek as well. But also, yeah, I need to. My sales director would not be happy with me.
Yeah,
But
cool.
yeah, I think that canvas is just a nice example of the stuff
Yeah,
that
it's
Douglas
really
got
good.
got
It's
tucked
really good
behind.
stuff.
And we have a phenomenal collection of distilleries you'll just never get to see again. Like we bottled a few like last year, I think, like in Garn Heath. Garn Heath only existed for 20 years and we've still got casks of it. Like it's stuff like that that's really exciting to have.
Hmm. Hmm. It's also, I mean, it's 59.5%, but it really tastes a lot smoother than that ABV.
Yeah, I think typically if we're looking to put something in a bottle, we'll always look at not putting the exact same whiskey on the market as soon as one cask is sold, but having something similar or similar profile or something we can price at a similar level. So we'll have all these different casks looking at. So a lot of people ask us, well, if that's still at 59.5%, you could have left it for longer, you could have aged that up, but it's already exquisite where it is. And it
Hmm.
most likely ticked a point for us to be, oh, this is around the age of a grain whiskey we like to do from a closed distillery. So it's about bottling stuff when we think it's appropriate.
Yeah. As soon as I said it tastes smoother than the ABV, then I knew that somebody was going to say I shouldn't have used the word smooth, but there you go. Good question from Matthias. Not sure if it's a fair question or one that can easily be answered, but with closed distilleries like this, if you like this, what other distilleries or types of bottling should you be looking at?
So I do think you're going to get similar profile with similar aged grain whiskies. Like I said at the very beginning when we had the Strathclyde, there's variation, but there's not dramatic variation,
Mhm.
especially as we get older. So once we're getting older and older and older, they're all, especially if they're bourbon casking. Sorry, the casking is probably more important than the distillery. But for us, if you're looking at that kind of creamy, very mellowed out style, I think you're going to find something quite similar across most grain whiskies of this age.
Mhm.
If it's, I really like it in a refill cask, so that kind of more delicate cask influence that this one is. If you imagine 30 years in the first fill, it's probably going to be pretty woody and pretty
Yeah,
dominating,
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
spicy.
Yeah, things like Cameron Bridge, other grain distilleries. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Cambridge, Carsbridge, you probably North British is maybe a little bit different.
Hmm.
Ones that I'd always jump for are something like a Port Dundas or Dumbarton. I'm a big fan of Port Dundas, or other closed Glasgow distillery.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd say you're going to get similar profile, but definitely look at the casking. If you like that style, look for the refill side of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, I think so too. That makes the biggest difference in these types of whiskey.
Yeah, it's not the same as getting two 30-year-old single malts that could be completely different. And whereas this, there's a pretty consistent level you get with older grain.
Hmm. Dougal, you've got two slides left. Something about casks, single cask personalization, and something about the distillery. And we've got one whiskey left.
Oh yeah,
What?
the final whiskey I didn't have a slide for, so we didn't.
Yeah,
We're gonna have to use
I
that this one.
actually have a picture of it.
Ah, perfect.
I've got it. I've got it. So, do you want to start with the whiskey?
Yeah, I think we should all have whiskey in a glass and
Yeah, I
go
think
from
so
there.
too. Spiritualist Craigellachie, 14-year-old.
So I couldn't even find a cast sample of this. So I've had to steal something similar, but not the same.
I'll put the bottle on the screen for you guys. So the spiritualist is another like sub segment of your bottlings.
It was a limited edition series we did in 2020. So we often will try and match up with what's going on in the world, or we will try and do like a little run of limited editions, like a little collector's series of 3 or 4 or 5. So this is a collection of 3. We did a Kalila, we did a older grain, it was a Cameron Bridge, I think, or Strathclyde. Oh no, it was Dumbarton potentially. Either way, it was we did a younger Kalila, we did an older grain, and then we did this one. So this was a sherry casking of Speyside with our Craigellachie. But the whole idea was serving it up cask strength and giving kind of full-blooded style, if you like, but with a nice big sherry influence on a Craigellachie.
Mm.
I'm a big fan of Craigellachie. It's one of these distilleries that has proper weight and body. And for Douglas Laing, it's cask strength, it's untouched, it's unfiltered. It's doing a lot of the right things, I think, for this whiskey to do it justice. So that's where I typically see it with a nice sherry casking. So like my bottle's actually a sister casking, and I've got a very nice color on it from our sherry bottle.
Is that the 20-year-old?
So it's the 15. So
The
it's literally
15,
just
okay.
one. So it's literally just 1 year older with the exact same cast type.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course, yeah, it can't be a sister cask if it's 20-year-old. There you go. I just had a 20-year-old last Saturday. That's why I'm asking. So
So yeah, so the Spirituals series was just a one-off series in 2020 that we did, just with cast strength example of these 3 distilleries with the old
also
type.
309 bottles bottled at 52%, charged from a sherry butt. So I guess that's first fill sherry.
No, I imagine that'll probably be a second fill sherry just
Second
by
fill too.
looking by looking at the color that we've got in it this time.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
And
Yeah.
my kind of taste of the first bottling was it didn't taste like me 15 years cast strength in a full sherry.
Yeah, sure.
Or sorry, for full sherry. For me, it tasted a little bit more subtle than that. It wasn't quite punch you in the face and chew on a bit of wood sherry casking that I would kind of expect with that.
Mhm.
So yeah, mine's a little bit higher ABV, but not by much. So I have tried to find an appropriate dram to.
Anthony is, as we say here in Belgium, I don't know if it's a British expression, taking the words right out of my mouth. I can see what you mean with potential to overpower.
Yeah, you can tell that if we did this in first fill, that it would be pretty intense. And Craigellachie, it holds up really well. We love working with sherry casking of Craigellachie. It's a really meaty, quite heavy spirit in general, so it holds up in sherry casking really well. But even then, any distillery can be dominated by first fill sherry.
Mm.
There's a reason often time first fill sherry is used as a finishing product rather than a full maturation product. Oh, but yeah, I'm a big fan of Craigellachie. I think it's one of these whiskies that I think they're now doing very good examples of Craigellachie official bottlings, but for a long time it's kind of a bit hit and miss.
I think Craigellachie is one of those distilleries that's just a little bit different from all of the others. You've got a lot of distilleries that are very similar in style, but Craigellachie really has its really own personality style.
Yes, absolutely,
Stands
100%
out.
agree. Yeah, very much stand out. We're lucky we've got an excellent relationship with them, so we get quite a lot of access to Craigellachie, to Aberfeldy, and first a few others of Bracknell as well, to be honest. So we've got very good access to the liquid and a very good relationship with those guys.
Mm.
But yeah, certainly Craigellachie is one that we like playing around with. This is certainly us with our own cask selection for it. Craig Elk also. I like the fact that the core they're like kind of standard bottles of 13-year-old. It's kind of
Yeah,
weird. I
yeah,
like it.
just
It's good.
something different. Yeah, the only
And
ones doing it.
it's kind of for us as well with all the single casks. Anytime someone sees a 17-year-old bottled in December, well, why didn't you wait until it was 18? Because it was ready. It's because
Yeah,
we feel it was good. So
yeah. I'm really looking forward to tasting notes on this one. Um, there's already some coming up, but I'll give you guys some time. Maybe I'll put the slide on Dougal for the single casks personalization that you guys do.
yeah,
And you
I just threw it
we
in to
can
give you
talk
an idea
about this a
because
little bit. Yeah.
it was purely I threw it up here just because the Spirituous series was quite reflective of this. Of this old, especially old particular is quite traditional in terms of the liquid we use. There's a lot of refill bourbons, there's a lot of sherry casking, not much else. And that's partly by Fred. Fred was always adamant, like I said, that we're serving whiskey. We're not here to serve sherry with a hint of whiskey. We don't want that to happen. But at the same time, we're pretty open to doing a lot of fun things and a lot of these are some of the kind of my favorite caskings that we've done over the years of personalized labels and quite
Mm.
unique labels and one-offs, and some of the ones
I,
for Asia Pacific is really really fun.
I like
Uh,
the Rock Island Finest, the green one on the.
yeah, it's really really cool. So
Yeah.
this kind of stuff I love because it means that we're quite a traditional company, but also at the same time we do a lot of funky stuff and a lot of fun stuff. With the spiritual series, exactly that. It's just us offering up something a bit different.
Yeah, that's also something I know I've talked to you about in earlier tastings and also to Lucy when I did the podcast with her last year. Um, there's a lot of fun going on in Douglas Laing, what you guys are doing and how you're presenting yourself to the world, which is a breath of fresh air, I think. And Big Pete was, of course, the first one of the first brands injecting some fun in the whiskey world, which was quite
Yeah,
serious.
I think it really shows that yeah, Fred's still very much involved in the company, but also with Carol as being so heavily involved, we've got a very youthful team. Like we're a pretty young company overall. And with the regional malts, it really offered us the chance to be pretty unique. And the stylistic choices that we made are very, very unique as a process. And you see it reflected. You see it in the whiskey world today. You see a lot more vibrant, funky styles, and we were definitely ahead of the game with stuff like Big P.
Mhm.
What introducing this kind of stuff to the old particular series. It's like us saying, yeah, this is all about seriously good whiskey, but it doesn't mean it has to be stuffy. It doesn't have to be tartan and bagpipes. We don't have to be over the top Scottish. We can be pretty funky and the quality will still shine through. Big Pete being a perfect example of that. Big Pete's pretty, for a lot of people, is the challenging bit. Nothing to do with the liquid, it's just how it looks. But
Mhm.
that's the whole point, is it stands out and it really does stand out. But for us, it's one of these ones that we can, especially with the personalized labels like this. So these are all single casts we've done for personal customers or certain distributors. They're all with a nod to us, but also a nod to the customer, and we can cater to that. We use the word agility quite a lot or agile
Mhm.
quite a lot. If there's a trend, we can hop on it really really quickly.
Yeah.
And but even
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just going to say, like things like if anyone picked up a bottle of our Timber's Beastie Meet the Beast bottling from last year,
Yeah.
coming with 3D glasses and the changing shoot, like we've got so many different things like that. There's some really fun stuff coming this year that we're very excited about. But there's a lot of chance to play around with things, not necessarily taking away from the whiskey. It's just we definitely take pride in the brands and the strength of the branding themselves.
Mhm. I'm just happy that something like Big Pete happened and that was actually a success. Because if it wasn't, then maybe we would still have more stuffiness in the whiskey world and more seriousness. I think
Yeah,
it's
I
really
think
that's really a point in time where whiskey got some fun injected into it, and I really like that.
I think for me, like we're getting far better, and we're still got a long way to go in terms of inclusivity and making sure we're a bit more balanced. But definitely with involving people from different parts of the world, involving people
Mm,
from different walks of life, trying to get something that represents a little bit more of the eclectic mix that is the world. And yeah, lots of people gravitate, oh, they love Scallywag, or they love Rock Island, or they love Big Pete, but also something like this. someone might not necessarily know anything about whiskey, but they could pick up a bottle with a cool label and that could
Mhm,
get them into whiskey, which is amazing. Whereas if someone looks at a bottle that is just indecipherable text and
mhm.
just sometimes information is great, sometimes it can just be quite intimidating for someone coming into whiskey. Whereas if someone just says, "Oh, I saw a cool bottle with a cool image on it, and that got me into whiskey." Perfect.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah,
And it even was good whiskey.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Something else
Yeah, this
you'd
was.
like to talk about, Dougal?
We're very very close. It's so close. I can say it's within the next 4 weeks or so. Um, so Douglas Laing, we bought Strathern, or at the time the smallest distillery in Scotland in 2019, which has now been beaten. There's a few of the island distilleries that are smaller than us now, but the kind of middle picture in the bottom of Matthew carrying bags of malt up a set of stairs to drop in the mash tun manually. It highlights how handcrafted this is. So Strathern's right at the bottom of the Highlands. We're already using some of the liquid in our Timber's Beastie bottlings, actually. And we are very fast approaching the first official launch for Douglas Laing and Strathern. So we started as a blender. We then, of course, became a bottler. In 2019, we acquired a chance to become a distiller as well. Angela, down the very bottom left, is the head distiller at Strathern. Sadly, you can't see her face, but it's one of these ones that shows one, how hands on it is, but two, Angela, well, in her early 30s, was voted Distiller of the Year by Spirits Business last year. She's already about to become the chairwoman of the Institute of Brewing and Distilling. Like, we cannot stress the talent of the team here. She came from a brewer's background, so we're using a type of barley at Strathern that very few people are using. It's typically used in brewing. For us, we are not focused on alcohol yield at all. It's all about flavor. It's all about producing something really unique, really robust, really big in style. And so, yeah, you'll find in April, the first bottling of Douglas Laing Strathern will be hitting the markets. So we will be doing something very, very special.
Okay. And also in Belgium, I guess I'm looking at you, Cinoco people.
Yes, it
Uh,
should be on its way to Belgium as well.
yeah. Cool, cool, cool.
And my favorite thing about it, if you look at, so one, that's the stills, which already lots of people assume are Armagnac or brandy stills or something like that. But if you look in the very kind of center of the bottom, you'll notice the open spirit still. So there is no sample safe. There's not cuts. Cuts are not done by temperature or time. Cuts are done by taste.
Okay.
So you can see the small kind of copper, looks like a magic lamp from Aladdin, but that's the spirit flowing out. And it is purely, you put a finger underneath there, taste it, taste it, taste it. The spirit has changed, the spirit gets cut. So incredibly unique process. And we're so excited to have it out in the world. And it's going to be done in a typical Douglas Laing way. So it's going to be high alcohol, it's going to be natural color, it's going to be non-chill filtered. It's going to tick every box that a lot of people would expect for us.
It's going to be a little bit fun.
Yep, but also going to be very small batch, as
Yeah.
you may expect again.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
Well,
wanted to
well,
add that this is like the next big thing for us this year. It was a huge focus in Strathern this year.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Let's go back to the whiskey that we're tasting right now. I've seen some stuff going on here. I'm really enjoying the strength this one takes towards the finish. It doesn't just simmer down after leaving the palate, rather brings another solid wave of flavor before it starts to tone down. Something between being on the palate and the effective finish.
Yeah, it's got that lingering spice stays all the
Yeah,
way through for sure. Like, it's super tasty.
yeah. And Stefan is saying might be a bit too strong on the sherry for his taste, but it's actually quite nice. Fruitcake in the nose, light spices, some grassy floral touches, and then
Yeah,
the
definitely.
dry
The
finish. Yeah,
dry finish as well. Again, it's kind of expected with a maturation in a sherry cask like this one. So,
yeah.
and I also should have said with all of our bottlings, if it says sherry, assume Oloroso. If it's PX, if it's Amontillado, it's going to be named on the bottling. So
Mhm.
yeah, this is Oloroso. So we can expect some of that dryness, that kind of slight winter spice pepperiness.
Yeah. These kinds of series, like small sub-segments, say it. Are you planning on doing more of this, like the Spiritualist?
So we do. It really depends on individual markets and what we're planning on doing. It's one of these ones that if we see an opportunity, we will, and we'll always have liquid that we have available. Um, it's if the opportunity presents itself. We don't
Mm.
like to plan too much. The other one we did quite a lot of is our Midnight series, which is kind of our celebration of sherry casking. So the Midnight series is all about cask strength, really dark and decadent sherry casking. That's kind of like an ongoing series, but there wasn't necessarily a planned number. There wasn't like an end game. It was just a case that if a cask came up that we felt would suit going into that series, we would put it in that series.
Yeah. Okay. Lucas is saying he's having a Strathern on a tasting next Monday, a small batch, 46.6%.
First. So yeah, that we did one small kind of cast release of liquid that we were not necessarily 100% involved in. So this release next month is our first official bottling, new branding,
First
and
real
yeah,
bottling. Yeah.
essentially first real bottling. So we've done a few small batches, and there was one official release from the previous owners.
Yeah.
But for us, we've definitely kind of tried to create a full, as you'd expect for us, it's a full brand around it, and also laying the groundwork for. So this is the inaugural bottling, but laying the groundwork for a core range at least. So
What's the plan for the core range for Strathern? In what like period of time will we expect like a broadly available Strathern?
the issue is to give anyone that maybe hasn't heard of Strathern context, when we bought Strathern, it only made about 28,000 litres a year. We are now around 55 to 60,000 litres a year. What that equates to is roughly one barrel per shift.
Mhm.
So it is never going to be a big, readily available single malt. It is always going to be for I mean, I'm in the right audience for the whiskey geeks in the world that are looking for something.
It's a bit comparable to like what Kilkerran is doing on a level of production,
Yeah.
I think.
So
Something like that.
our first bottling is 12,000 bottles.
12,000. Okay. Yeah. And the plan is for core range to be like an age statement, or what is the
We have
ultimate
that
plan?
potential. So we've now got liquid going back to 2013. So we've already got plus 10-year-old stock. Some of that's again coming back to Martin's question, but I think it was Martin that asked it about recasking. Um, a lot of the Strathern stuff we've had to recast just because the initial ownership was very heavy on kind of quarter casks, firkins, very concentrated, very woody, which is great if you're bottling 4 or 5 year olds going 30 litres into bottles. But if you're trying to make something more sustainable and bigger in style, we are more inclined to obviously work with our usual castings, refill hogsheads, bourbon barrels, sherry butts. So that's taken a lot of focus. So we do have age stock. We
Hmm.
do have the potential of doing it. It's just working out the volume wise. It's never going to be a big volume available.
Martin is asking me to show the bottle, but I think he's talking about a different
I
bottle.
think
But,
you may be talking about Strathern.
but hey, I showed him the bottle, so now he has to be happy. No, I was just putting in the chat, Dougal, if they have any more questions, if anybody has any more questions, now's the time because I'm working towards the closing of the official tasting for this for tonight. Um, is there anything else that you haven't told us yet that you would like to share with us?
I don't think so, guys. I think hopefully, for me, I love working with Douglas Laing because we really do have something for everyone. We have a taste for everyone. We have a cast style. If you want to talk about blends, we can talk about blends. If you want to talk about blended malts, we can talk about blended malts. Single grain, single cast, single malt. We really do have all of whiskey kind of complete. And for me, I love the idea of now that we're adding another thing to us, but with Strathern, but it does kind of complete the triangle for us. So we have all these different aspects of the business. And certainly, I know this year I'm going to be spending a lot of time talking about Strathern, but it's this really nice element of the business that we are maybe transitioning from a small business to a medium business. I still see Fred and Karen in the office every single day. It's still very much in the hands of the family with the kind of passing of the torch over to Cara this year. It's just this nice moment to be part of a company like this.
Hmm.
And that core ethos that I mentioned at the beginning of just doing whiskey the right way or producing authentic whiskey and transparent whiskey, we will always try and give as much detail to expect as much detail as we possibly can, as much as we're willing to. some things we want to keep as a family secret. And
Hmm.
I think that's okay as well. There's always people, if you offer someone something, they'll always ask for more. So we are
Sure.
fully aware of that. But we try and be as transparent as possible at what we're doing. But it is just trying to put the best whiskey we can in the bottle.
Well, which is a good goal in itself, I guess. So, and of course, all of the bottles that we tasted tonight, I think, are still available from Cinoco. So, get in touch with your contact at Cinoco if you want any of these. I don't have the prices here, so but you can always ask for them. Dougal, when are we going to see you next in Belgium?
I'll definitely be back for six. So I think that should be again. Or
That's
needless to say, we're
November.
always
That's a
final,
long
but
time, Dougal.
it's November away. It's a long time away. I'll try and find if someone invites me, maybe I'll get to come.
Let that be a hint to everybody around here to invite Dougal over for a tasting or for some kind of event. So, another question: any more special releases for this year besides Strathern?
Yeah, lots, the usual. So we have got, what can I say that's without giving too much away? The Fish Eel edition for Big Pete's is imminent. It's very, very close to being kind of officially in the bottle and things like that. And it's a cask finish on Big Pete that's never been seen before. So we're
Okay.
excited about that. We've got Rock Island and another cask type that we've never
Ooh.
used before at Douglas Laing.
As soon as you said Rock Island, Martin said Rock Island Mezcal?
Well,
Question mark?
we've done Mezcal, Martin, you know that. So
Yeah,
maybe there's something else that's Mezcal adjacent.
I really love that one too.
Yeah. We've got Epicurean and exciting cat. There's a lot of new casks for us that we've never really worked with before. So I'd say Epicurean, Big Pete, Rock Island, Timor's Beastie is again very close to launching the number edition number two of the cheese cellar collection. If anyone enjoyed the port casking of Timor's Beastie last year, the second edition of that is imminently arriving as well. So there's a lot of new influences that we've never worked with before. So yeah, lots of exciting things.
Maybe to finish off, a really nice compliment that I totally agree with from Matthias. I really appreciate the care that goes into the Scallywag, Epicurean Remarkables, not just into the names of cool distilleries. So just
Yeah, I think the brands are really strong, and I think they all have a story. They all have a clear focus. They now, I think, even if you consider Galdrons being the newest one, if you like, we've been making it since 2017. So that's 6 years of building the brand and building the recipe and getting the kind of core identity of them all there. It really shines through with something like Big Pete and Scallywag. The kind of two longest established have such a strong identity now that we can really play with them and do lots of fun things. But yeah, I think the whole regional malt series, there's still nothing really 100% like it to have a full collection of six.
Mhm.
We all, I think, I'm sure everyone in the group would agree, we're getting closer and closer to an islands region finally being recognised. So when we have the six regions, I think to have that full representation across them, I think we've kind of nailed it. And yes, there's always things we can continue to improve on, but yeah, the identity of them is very, very strong.
Yeah, and the base is just really good. What John is saying, just really good quality whiskey.
Yeah,
And that's always the base of everything, I think, in the
yeah,
whiskey
there's
business.
no dilution of quality there.
Dougal, thank you so much for a nice evening, for chatting to us, for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your insights. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
pleasure.
Thank you,
And yeah,
everybody. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for joining us again for a nice masterclass. I know there's one more masterclass I'm hosting for Cinoco in a couple of months' time. That'll be Glen Cadam and Tomental, I think. So I'll hope to see lots of you again. Yeah, thanks and see you next time.
thank you guys.